what we're going to try to avoid then, and obviously the terminology needs to be watched very carefully because the trickery is all over the place. Is to avoid making contracts with with the corporations of law enforcement and governments, etc. What do we avoid, John? I mean, first of all, Mr., Mrs., these prefixes. I understand. I was told this years ago when I looked at this in America back in the 90s. Uppercase letters for your name, and also person. Never refer to yourself as a person, right?
You made an interesting comment as you were discussing that there. You says, "Look, I understand," and you were going about something.
I understand. That's another one. Yeah,
yeah. Literally, it says when you're looking at things, there's certain phrases. Now, I learned something from an individual a number of years back early on. It was actually quite good, and it was something that your viewers should actually think about and listen. Now, we're not here as conspiracists. We're basically here to point out things and to ask them to think. Now, if we say to your viewers just now, look, if we use the English language, now we can use the English language, but for clarification, what we will do to obtain the meaning is we will go to a dictionary, take the Oxford Dictionary. So we will go there and they have a list of all the words you use. Now, every so often they take out a new word, so they've just added to it, right? So if we have an English language, and we have the Oxford Dictionary, and we also add on new words occasionally, why is there a need for law dictionaries? We have loads and loads of law dictionaries, far more than the Oxford Dictionary, and there's new editions all the time. The reason for that is the words that we use and we refer to understand just now, which you mentioned, under the Oxford Dictionary, understand basically just means, do you comprehend something? Now, under the system that they use, under the legal system, the legal dictionaries, the language is called legalese. It's completely separate from English. The words are identical, but the meanings are different. Now, in relation to the word understand, whereas in everyday life to men and women, it means comprehend, do you comprehend? Under their system, when a police officer has asked you if you understand, if you actually say yes, you've actually then become a slave. Because what the legalese term states is if you're confronted by an officer, when they say, do you understand? It literally means in their terminology, do you stand under my authority? So therefore, if you say to the constable, yes, I understand, that allows them, it creates joinder, which is a contractual agreement. It then allows them to prosecute you with their rules and to fine you or punish you. If you turn around and say to them, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't understand, the reply will come back, what do you mean you don't understand? I've just explained, you've breached some act of parliament. They say, do you not understand? What you should do is turn around and say, no, I do not stand under your authority and I don't consent. Now that keeps you out of their system because it confirms that you're a living man or living woman and you have nothing to do with them. They therefore cannot enforce the legislation. That's the way it works. But it's all about names. Now, the term you also refer to, the term person. Person is literally a legal entity. It says, so you don't use that. You are either a living man or woman, or obviously you can adopt the positions that they have within their system. And that comes down to things like legal entities, the person, and various other things. But these are all legal terms to give them authority. You will note that I've mentioned twice, I've mentioned a couple of times, we'll do it again. The common law principles are basically cause no harm, loss or injury to others and ensure your honourable and contractual dealings. That is common law in a nutshell. It could be God's law and universal law, everything. They're all the same. They operate under key principles, and these are the principles. That's it. Under their system, they have hundreds of statutes, acts of parliament, legislation, and they've just introduced COVID legislation. Wonderful, we've got new legislation. But the point is, they are all rules in the statutes and acts, but they're only applicable to a person. They're not applicable to living men and women. You will note when they look and they refer to and they write up the legislation, they will refer it always to a person. The person does this, the person must do this. It's a legal entity. It's not applicable to living men and women. So therefore, that's it. So you don't use the terminology they've got and you can stay out of the system. But they don't like that because they use this camouflage, they use trickery, and they use legalese to try to obviously entrap you and get joinder, which is create a contract. They've actually stuck in their system because a basic principle like your documentation, everything you have to identify yourself is in their system. It's to do with the person. So that gives them you're at disadvantage straight away, because if you produce ID or they ask you for ID and you produce it, it gives the legal fiction. So if they confirm, is this you? And then you look at your bank card and say, yes, straight away, you've got joinder. So you have to be very careful with what you do. It's all about trickery and it's all about contract.
So let's apply this to current events and all these statute law, corporate law, contractual law impositions over COVID involving businesses, employment, loss of freedom, wearing a mask. So say a police officer comes up to you and says, you're not wearing a mask and that's breaking the law. Give us an idea of how people should then respond.
First of all, just to clarify something, to let your viewers understand the difference. Although they go through various sittings in Parliament and they put forward legislation which is proposed, and it goes through various sittings in both houses and then gets royal assent, even if that's the case, it doesn't mean that it's law. For it to become law, the people have to consent. So if you believe that you're a living man or woman, you actually have a choice. It says the government and the state will actually say that they govern by consent. The police say that they police by consent. Now, what that means is that as a living man or woman, if you do not consent, it's not law. So this COVID legislation and any other legislation they have, when they take it out, it only becomes a law with your consent. So with you consenting to the legislation, it then carries the full force of law. If you do not consent, it's not law and they cannot enforce it. So when the police approach you and say, look, you're required to wear a mask. No, you're not, because there's no law. And if they refer you to statutory legislation, that is only applicable to the person, which is a contractual agreement, the legal entity. You state, no, I'm sorry, I do not stand under your authority. I don't consent. I'm a living man or a living woman. It doesn't apply to me. And then you can't say to them, well, where is the law that states I, as a living man, have to wear a mask? There's not a law. They'll refer you to a statutory act of Parliament, and they'll say, according to this legislation, and they'll give you the definition, the number, and the statute. Say, well, that's fine, but it's not applicable to me as a living man, which it's not. It's applicable to the legal entity which they created at birth, which is a legal fiction. And if they can get joinder and trick you into accepting the position of the legal fiction, you're then bound by their rules. As long as you're careful with what you do not get involved with them and try not to talk too much. If you get into a detailed conversation with them, they will trick you and they will try to establish joinder. The less you say, the better. The basic principles are confirm the law. Excuse me. Can you confirm what law states I have to wear a mask? Ask them if that's a question. If they reply with legislation, just say, I'm sorry, it's not applicable to a living man. I stand under common law. I do not stand under your authority and I do not consent. And that's it. And if they say anything else, just say, sorry, I do not answer questions. And that's it. Leave it. Say nothing else. They cannot do anything to you because they have not established joinder in a contract.
And the point is important to make that most of these police officers will have been given the spiel what to say in a situation, but they don't understand themselves or appreciate themselves what their language means.
To be fair, to defend a lot of the police as well, and again, I've met police. We've actually, when I went to court before, there was a great police officer met in Paisley. He was in Scotland. They actually have the police in court instead of security, but we'd actually been called for hearings, and I got to know the police quite well. But I like them; they're okay. A lot of the police, look, they're like everyone else. Now you get good and bad in every job, and it's the same with the police. So we're not trying to defend or stick up the police, because there are some dodgy police as well. But the point is, they have a job to do. Now, unfortunately, they are not told about all this. They do not understand this, comprehend. They do not understand this, but what they're doing is giving clear instructions from their superiors, and they're not told why. And they actually believe that they're enforcing laws. They don't understand that. They do not understand the significance. He says it's the same with judges. I spoke to one earlier in the week. They could not believe some of the things I was telling them. And I actually happened to have some information, and I spoke to this judge. And when they couldn't believe that they were a registered company, I actually emailed through later on information to confirm the company registration number. He says, which surprised them, because they actually believed that they were a court of law. It's not, it's a corporation. He says, effectively, not to bust a bubble, he said, but effectively, he says, the company you referred to as a court, it's a registered company. Effectively, it has the same status as McDonald's or Tesco's. He says, and what they do, it's like having, if you have a court there and they say they're enforcing rules and regulations and guidelines, that's the same as Tesco's laying down rules for their car park. And they're holding you accountable and fining you and punishing you. So you're called in front of the court manager or the Tesco's manager, who says he's got to prosecute you for parking the wrong way in his car park. It's a law and he's going to punish you. Well, that's what the courts do. It's exactly the same as McDonald's. It says for the enforcement team, it says we operate with police constables. It says McDonald's has Ronald McDonald in the uniform there and the staff. It's the same thing. They have a uniform. We're being silly just now. But the point is to get across the idea that these courts and these companies are exactly the same as any other company. There's no difference. It's just that because of the people's presumption and because they've managed to contract them, they actually believe that they are lawful courts of law and then the police are there to protect them. They're not. They're registered companies there to make a profit. And again, they're there to hold people in position and to bind them into slavery. They dictate where, you tell me where in the world just now, in any civilized country, you can actually take the people and lock them up in their houses and keep them there. It says you're finishing off not only their livelihoods, it says you're looking at business, the amount of businesses that will go under and the effect it has on the economy is disgusting. And yet, they're doing that on the rumour of this COVID. Now, so we're not getting the issue of COVID. There's other reasons like 5G, various other things. But the point is, they're laying legislation down and effectively controlling the people, hold them into slavery, and dictating what they can and can't do. Even during the war, the Second World War, it says you're not confined to your property. It says they're doing that. We have, because of the effect it's having just now in the economy and families, people are losing houses, they're losing jobs, they're losing children. We have people cannot feed their families because of no money. People are actually using food banks because of the position the government are putting them in. They know exactly what they're doing, and how a government can treat the people like that is disgusting. And it says it should not happen, and it says yet it is. And we're supposed to be one of the most civilized countries in the world. The UK just now will probably be, in my opinion, which I will say, in my opinion, it must be the most corrupt government in the world. It is just now, without the UK. And we hear about people go up and they're dragged in front of war crimes. The United Nations, they're prosecuted for war crimes against the people. Well, it's through the use of the legal fiction. What the government are doing to the people in this country is disgusting. And they've known about it, and it's been going on for years. They know exactly what they're doing. The whole system is to control the people. And effectively, with what they're doing just now, it's actually getting worse rather than better. So the people have to understand that there is a choice here. There's two different systems at play. There's a commercial system, which is run by the government, and then you have, obviously, common law, which is down to the people. Now, you don't have to change your life. You don't change your day-to-day routine. But by confirming that you stand under common law and that you do live and exist as a living man or woman, it gives you the opportunity then to protect yourself and your families just by adopting this approach.
Well, I mean, these people have to go to jail for the rest of their lives. I think they ought to reincarnate a few thousand times to complete the sentence, given, what they're knowingly imposing on the population, all the suffering and deprivation that's that's gathering all the time. And from the perspective that we're coming from here, John, that which is put under house arrest, that which is told that its business must close, is actually a fictional corporate entity which the living, breathing men and women have been tricked into associating with and identifying with. And so the living, breathing men and women go under house arrest and close their businesses simply because they think the entity and them are the same thing.
When you accept the position of the entity and the system, they're closing down these companies just now, which is horrendous. If you think about the effect it has on the people and obviously their families and the community, they're closing these businesses. But what you've got to remember is these individuals are accepting the legal title, the Mr., the Miss, the Mrs., or so on. Not only that, the companies that they have are actually registered under the statutory system. So they're registered with Companies House. Now, what that effectively means is that their legislation and rules apply to the company. Their legislation and rules apply to the legal entity, the person, the man or the woman. Now, with that, you find it very, very difficult to then argue. Although you have rights under common law as a man or a woman, because you operate under the trading name, when you register a company under the system, you give the name of effectively the owner of the business. That will be the legal entity. As soon as you put the legal entity down there, you're in commerce and their rules apply. Now, while obviously it's difficult, you can take them on and challenge them, and you may end up with a fine or something. But when push comes to shove, the government can enforce anything they want because you are in their system. They have joined her because of this contract through Companies House. If you stand under common law as a living man or woman, you can actually trade a business under common law as well, which means that the rules are not applicable to you. So there's a way out of it. It's simply by doing that.
So you've got all these people who don't want to shut their businesses down because they know where that's going to lead, and it has for so many. So they don't want to go into these lockdowns. They don't want to shut the business down. Using common law, how can they continue to trade, John?
Well, with common law, the simple thing, it's basically the system's set up for protection only. So it doesn't actually affect your life just now, but by making a simple declaration of your birth on the website, that confirms that you exist as a living man or woman. Now, as soon as you establish this fact, it changes things completely, because as a living man or woman, you have the right not to suffer harm, loss, or injury. And obviously in contractual dealings, people have to deal with you honourably. Now, the state do not do that. So therefore, by establishing a position, and all you're doing is making a declaration of your birth, a public declaration to confirm that you are born, when you are born, where you are born, and your parents' names. So that's it. That's all it is. It costs nothing to do. But having done that, what you can then do as a living man or woman, you can do things like claim ownership of the legal title to further protect yourself. But not only that, if to obtain money to support your family and yourself, you require to run a business to earn a living, what you can do is you can do that through common law. Now, common law only deals with men and women. So we don't deal with corporations. But if you wish to obviously earn a living and you're required to do so by trading and using an entity, what we do is we give men and women the opportunity to confirm that they wish to run a business to make money. Now, in doing so, they identify themselves as the individual responsible for the company. So the living man or the living woman will go down as being the individual responsible for the company. They will then give a trading name under which they wish to operate. Now, the trading name could be the same as the existing name they have for their business under the statutory system. It doesn't matter. Or they can create a new name. But having done that, what they then do is they then receive a new registration number under common law when they do that. And by having that, they've then confirmed that they are trading under the common law system. Now, if the council employees, the licensing authorities or the police come in and they say you have to comply with legislation, you have to wear a mask, you have to social distance. It's not applicable. It's not applicable because they stand as living men and women under common law. And also, it's not applicable because the companies that they're operating are run under company law, common law, which means that the rules and regulations are not applicable to them. It's only for statutory companies. And as they're operating under common law and a common law company, the rules don't apply and they cannot be enforced.
So people can do all this through commonlawcourt.com, right?
Yes. Yeah. The site was set up. What we've got to remember is the first case was actually convened. The common law court is set up literally to provide a lawful remedy for the people, and that's it. That's all it's about, to protect people. Now, it's protecting them by establishing their position as a living man or woman. So many of your viewers have never heard about this before will start to understand, look, there is two systems here, but unfortunately they have nothing to confirm they exist under common law. When they make the declaration on the common law court site, it's free of charge, but when they do so, they're given a registration number. Now, when they use that number to the authorities, it confirms their standing and that the statutory rules are not applicable to them. Now, they can do that. The website was set up initially because when we convene the court, there has to be a public record. So it's set up initially with 4 pages. But when we set up the site, which a number of us done this, what happened is people throughout the UK spoke to us and says, can we use this as well? And from there, it then developed, and then internationally we've got that. We're actually sitting now with people submitting declarations from 138 countries. They're all using this.
They're used, aren't you, in current situations?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we actually have quite a few people helping out just now. It says, but obviously, because of the amount just now and what's currently going on worldwide, we're obviously getting more people helping. So we've had a backlog with applications coming in, but we're working our way through them and we're nearly getting there. But it's not that. They say we find that people are contacting us about things like running a business and they're receiving complaints or fines, or they're being threatened by the state, the authorities, or the police. They're contacting us daily. We're dealing with people that are actually dealing with other issues, crime. We've got people losing houses, losing children, and various other things. So we deal with these cases. We have convened our own courts as well. We've prosecuted various people, including 7 judges. Be glad to hear. In fact, on that point, you have 7 judges operating just now, 4 in Scotland, 2 in England, and 1 in France. These judges are all convicted criminals. They're convicted by the people, and yet the state have been informed about it, and yet the state have them operating in the courts, convicted criminals. So it's ludicrous, but This is what happened.
The whole system's run by criminals, convicted and otherwise. An important point there, John, which will affect, of course, a lot of parents and their concerns. Social services, presumably, is corporation.
Yes, yeah.
So the same applies when they're trying to take your kids away.
Well, on the point there, this is I've actually lodged, this is on behalf of the people, because we have many people are obviously have an issue with social services.
You're right.
We've obviously been waiting for a suitable case to come up, but the people stand their ground and say, look, we want to do something. So as that happens, what we've done is we've took on a case. Now, the case we've took on regards 5 children that were removed from home. Now, there's no doubt whatsoever that there's no reason to remove these children. But it's a long, complicated story, but it's something that obviously the many people who are aware of this situation say, look, it's disgusting, we need to do something. So what we've done is we've actually lodged papers in their court. Now, we do not accept their courts because it's a registered company and it's not a court. So what we've actually done is we've submitted papers to the court against an individual employee for social services. Well, it's actually in Scotland, so they're called a children's reporter. But this children's reporter was involved in removing 5 children. So what we did is we've actually spoken to the parents. Now, the parents had actually recorded the births for the children under common law. But what they do is to protect the children, we need to have the legal title. But what's happened is in doing this and recording the births, it was decided to protect the children that I was given permission and consent to apply for ownership of the legal fiction for the children. So effectively what that meant is priority lies with the individuals, the parents, because anyone under 16 cannot own their fiction. It's just what's been decided and accepted by the people. So once you're 16, you can take ownership of your legal title. But up until 16, the parents are given preference or first claim on the title. The parents decided that they were happy for me to obtain ownership of the title. So I obtained the ownership of 5 titles. Now this is legal titles, it's names that I own. However, the government had actually went to court and this children's reporter and obtained an order and removed the children. Now, effectively what they've done is if you have, we've got 5 children and they have a birth certificate under common law to state that they're living children. We then have legal fictions which exist. Now, the legal fictions have been claimed by me. I own the legal fictions and I have certificates from a court carrying the authority of the people to confirm that I own the fictions. So effectively, I have them. I have documents for them as well, confirming that I own them. So I'm separate. I live in a different city. I have these documents. These titles are mine. However, the social services went to the court and used these titles without my consent. They then fraudulently obtained a court order, and then they then wanted to enforce the order, but the order was issued to remove the legal titles. They're my legal titles. But the point is, they decided to go to a household and they selected these 5 children and they've taken them in. The titles are not attached to the children. They have nothing to do with the children. I own the titles. I have ownership. I have the paperwork and ownership. But they've decided, because they got this order, they wanted these children, so they have says these titles are attached to your children. We're going to take your children, and they just took them. So effectively, what they've done is kidnap the children, and they're unlawfully detaining them. He said, now I then got involved, so we wrote to the court. When I wrote to the court didn't want to deal with me. So we actually persisted for a couple of weeks, and when we did that, eventually the court says, well, we're not dealing with you. You're not on the court papers. I says, yes, I am, because my legal titles are referred to in the court papers. They says, we're not accepting it. He says, you can have your paperwork back. I said, I don't want the paperwork back because it's lodged in court and it will stay as a part of the court record. So they kept the paperwork and sent back a letter saying, we don't want to deal with you. So I then went to the police to report it, and we walked into the police station headquarters to report it to the police. They didn't want to speak to me. I then gave them a copy of the paperwork for the chief constable. They didn't want to pass it on, but I ensured that they took a statement. So they took the statement from my report. They then said they'd investigate. I think the children have been questioned, but that's all that's happened. The paperwork was sent and served on the chief constable the next day, and the chief constable has ignored it. It's been signed for, so I've proved receipt. They have the paperwork. After a week, I emailed them on his personal email address, which I got from the police. He's not responded. They've just totally ignored it. They've done nothing. So I then took a personal action for money, a monetary award against this individual, the children's reporter. We put the paperwork in and it was signed for into court. So they've received it, which it should be lodged. And then what happened a couple of days later, when I phoned up to confirm the court reference number, they told me that they'd lost the paperwork. Surprisingly, it had been signed for, and therefore I've provided service within their own system, so they've been served with it. But when I pointed out that what they're doing was criminal, they took a couple of days and then decided that they've actually found the paperwork. So after finding the paperwork, they said, well, we have to pass on to a judge. Well, it doesn't involve a judge, because when the paperwork's submitted, all they have to do is check that it's laid out in the correct format, which it is. But they couldn't deal with it, so they passed on to the sheriff, the judge. So I left it. A week later, I phoned back. I said, look, I'm still waiting to hear what's happening. They said, well, we can't find your paperwork. I said, but you had the paperwork last week. You confirmed that you had it, and you're passing it to a judge. He said, well, I've lost it again. So it took him another 4 days to find it. And when I insisted that we prosecute, they've then admitted they found the paperwork. But again, they're saying that they have to pass on to the judge. So I left it and I said, well, why are you passing on to the judge? And there was email correspondence confirming this. I said, well, why does this affect the judge. He says at no time should this be put before the judge, because all it's required to do is, as an administrative procedure, all they have to do is check the paperwork's laid out correctly. It doesn't involve a judge. They say, well, we can't deal with it, so we've passed on to the judge. I said, well, you can't do that. He said, but while we're on it, he says, can you provide me a copy of your statement, your internal statement for the company, that confirms your policy regarding the Slavery Act 2015. So basically, they have to ensure that they're complying with the Slavery Act, and they have to have a clear policy laid out. So I asked them as the requirement to give me a copy of that. They roll back and says, no. He says, we're okay. We're sorry. We don't have to comply with the Slavery Act simply because we're not a company. At which point I wrote back to them and said, well, I'm sorry, you are a company. Here's your registration papers. And I gave them the registration papers with the company reference, and I've not heard since. And they've not dealt with the paperwork, and they've not dealt with this issue at all. And the children are still there, but they don't want to deal with it. And yet, it says they have actually removed the children by kidnapping. Because if you have children, it's like go to your next door neighbour or the next few households, pick 5 children randomly, right? If they register a birth under common law, you've established a living, and then the government decide they want these children. So what they're going to do is take a random name, a legal title, and they then turn up in the house and say, right, we're arresting you. We've got a court order for this title here. You are being attached to this title, so we're going to kidnap you. And they take you away. That's what happened to these children. They've attached a slave name onto the child, he says, and removed the child as kidnapping. But not only that, I've actually confirmed that I own these titles, and they're ignoring that. Now, they know that they're in a sticky wicket because this is the first time this has been tried. Now, we're not going to the courts, but what we've done is put in a claim for damages. Now, the damages is based on the length of time that these individuals have been removed from their house. And also, it is given, I think there's 8 pieces of legislation or 8 crimes that they've committed against the people. So for each crime, we've put in an award for that as well. Now, the money that comes in from this will be used for or to assist with the setup of a common law court enforcement, which is constables for the common law court. So the money goes there, so nobody benefits from it, but the children will be released. Now, we've put this in and we've put this claim in, but we're not asking for a hearing. We've stated to them that they are required to ensure, as a service provider and a registered company, this is a court, they are only there to ensure that we're paid the money that's due and that the individual we refer to is dismissed from our job. However, if this individual wishes to object to this, or if she wishes to dispute this position, we're quite happy to attend a hearing for clarification purposes only. So if we turn up at a hearing, we do so, but it's only to clarify our position. They don't have joined up, they don't have a contract with us. We're quite happy to turn up only to explain why they've got to comply with what we say. Now, there is another issue we've added, a final part we've added, which I'll explain just now to your viewers. We refer then to the appointment of an individual to deal with this dispute if it goes to one of their courts. This individual would normally be a judge. So we referred to that and explained our position and then left it. Now, we've served that paper on just now. We're waiting to hear in court, and we're actually going to escalate this also in relation to COVID as well. The people have decided we wish to take on a case against Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon. So the papers are being drafted out just now. They're near completion, but that will be served within the next week, probably a week to 10 days. And because this is of public interest as well, it will also go up on the internet because it's a public record and it's the public are actioning this case under common law. But if we go back to the point I was making just now, which I will explain a little bit more, it's showing you how stupid their system is. When we're going to a court, as we deal with a judge, we refer to it earlier on that the judges do not like the position of a living man or woman. And when you actually go into a court, they will actually bully you to accept the legal fiction, and they will threaten you as well. Now, what they will also do, and it's happened many times, they will go in, and if you actually stand and say you're a living man, they will actually question your mental stability. And we have had actually people removed from court and sent for a medical examination. He said, because they've obviously questioned their standing. Now, what we've done is we had a guy who's been in court before, and his a case which is 100% he's won. There's not an issue about that, what's happened to him, but they will not deal with it in court. Now, he's introduced himself as a living man on each occasion, and we're going, it was the fourth time we're going, and we knew what the judge was doing. He was literally implying that he wasn't stable and he wouldn't accept a living man. So what we did is we said to him, look, play it this way. So what happened is the individual went down to court and he was asked who he was. So he explained he's a living man. Now, we got him to engage in conversation for about 3 minutes on this issue. So he said, well, I'm a living man, but I'm quite happy to deal with the issue before you. I actually own the legal fiction. And he spoke for a couple of minutes. So there was a conversation between the judge and the individual. Eventually, the judge turned around and says, well, look, I've had enough. I'm sorry, I'm going to proceed. And this is where it kicked in. So what the guy did is he turned around and said, well, I'm sorry, look, before you proceed, I'd like to express to the court that I'm concerned. At which point the judge looked at him sharp and he said, concerned? What do you mean concerned? He says, well, I'm concerned about you. In which case the judge says, concerned about me? What do you mean? What do you mean? And he says, well, we've actually been having a conversation for 2 or 3 minutes. We've had a chat. We've spoken on that. Somehow, you seem to lack the mental capacity to determine that I'm a living man. In fact, you've actually stated to me, if I was to accept the position of a person, which is a lifeless entity, a dead entity, if I was to accept that position, you've effectively told me that you'll speak to the dead. If I spoke to the dead, I'd be locked up in a loony bin. He said, but you've actually stated you can do that. He says, so therefore, if you cannot recognize a living man in front of you, having spoken to him for a number of minutes, he says, I'm questioning your mental stability. He says, not only that, you've openly confirmed that you will speak to the dead. He says, for your safety and the public safety, I believe you should be mentally assessed. And until such time as we've established that you have a mental capacity to deal with this, you should remove yourself from this case and dismiss it. The judge says, I'm not dealing with this just now. This is ridiculous. I'm adjourning this for 2 months, bang. And he got up and walked out of court. So what we're doing in the paperwork is we're putting into the judges now, into the courts. If you require a hearing to deal with an issue, we're quite happy to attend, but any individual that is appointed to deal with this issue or to adjudicate must be of sound mind. As with any reasonably minded man or woman, they would be able to accept the position of a living man or living woman, having spoken to them for a number of minutes. And not only that, a reasonable minded living man or woman would not be able to speak to the dead. Therefore, if an individual adjudicating this matter cannot establish the living man or woman before them, and they openly speak to the dead, they will have established that they're not of sound mind and they should not be dealing with this issue. So therefore, that means that no judge in the country can actually sit and adjudicate over you. So we've put that into the paperwork just now, and we've actually got some more cases going in shortly on behalf of the people. But needless to say, they haven't got back this yet.
Hally bloody Lulia, I say.
It shows how stupid it is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Stupid and corrupt. Thanks for your time. Taken enough. But just very briefly, how long have you been researching this and how did you get into it?
Excuse me. I left, when I left school, I studied electrical and electronic engineering. Now, I happened to be in Aberdeen at the time and I wanted to work offshore. But before I could work offshore, I had to do a survival certificate and they were only running them every 3 or 4 months. So I had to wait 3 or 4 months. But having left college and with qualifications, I didn't want to sit and do nothing. So I decided to take on a job. And coincidentally, looking in the paper, there happened to be an advert for, believe it or not, trainee croupiers in a casino. I thought, I'd never seen that. I said, I quite fancy that. So I went in and joined and I loved it. I actually ended up staying. It was 21 years. I ended up with a really good career. And the industry has various grades of license and you progress through the ranks. I obtained the highest ranking certificate. I ended up a general manager and also a company director. I worked for large PLCs and had a very, very successful career. Unfortunately, after 21 years, the PLC that I worked for had informed all the general managers that they were selling the company. So there was only realistically 2 potential buyers, which I wasn't really keen on working for a PLC, these PLCs, and I thought, no, I'll go elsewhere. So I decided to go work for a private club, a casino, with a couple of directors who I found out after a year were criminals. They were failing to comply with things, and as my license was in danger as a general manager, I had to leave. So I left to protect myself. Now, the industry was regulated at the time by the government, and if a general manager leaves, we had to explain why I was leaving, and they had found out that for 7 or 8 years, they had been incompetent because they had allowed these directors to break the law. Now, at the time, they were trying to increase the industry and take on these super casinos, and the cabinet minister that dealt with it was Tessa Jowell, who's since passed away. But she dealt personally with my case as well, and she basically hung me out to dry. They were aware that the government were negligent. They were aware that there was crimes being committed, but they could not let the public know. So they actually covered it up. I lost everything, career, job, everything, money. I lost everything, including bankruptcy. But to overcome that, I decided to use what I had left savings to go and challenge these directors for the remainder of my contract, which was fixed term. I went to the court, obtained a solicitor, as you do. You think you require a solicitor. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. But when I went to court, I found out how corrupt the system is. And then when I'd run out of money, I ended up bankrupt. I had to wait till my bankruptcy had been obviously finished. And I went back to the court to fight with this as an individual, took on the judges, and I realised how corrupt the system was. I then studied and found out with this, spoke to lots of people, done a lot of research. It took me 10, 11 years fighting this, and I found out that you will never, ever in their system beat them, ever. Now, we're not here to knock the system, because I like the system. The system has actually been set up over centuries, and it's great. The problem we have with the system is the individuals who run it. They're corrupt and they're criminals. It's simply put, that's it is. If we had the right people operating the system will protect the people. But if you allow criminals to run the system, it will never work. Now, because they don't even comply with their own rules, it says they'll just do whatever they want to protect big business, vested interest, big companies. Now, they're not there for the people. Now, having decided that obviously you can never beat them, I've spoken to many people and we looked at a way around it. And we said, well, look, can you do this? And we came up with the idea, said, well, we have a right to convene our own courts, which means you're removing yourself from the system and you can set up. Now, by doing that and then taking the ownership of the legal title, it's great. They can't do anything to you. So we set that up, and from there, it's just escalated. It's grown arms and legs. Everyone uses this, but the crucial point is, by setting this up, it's only set up to provide a lawful remedy. And the thing is, even when we highlight the crimes that's been committed with the birth certificate, we've actually went into court and offered the judges and prosecutors the chance to dispute ownership of the fiction and to explain what's happened, but they can't answer it. They actually turn away. They won't do it because it confirms that the government are committing crimes against the people every day. In the courts with birth certificates, they confirm it. The system is so well rigged, but the common law court is the only one that can actually obtain ownership of the fiction, and that's what sets us apart. And because we've set up a system for registration for basically says living births, for the births and the declarations, that then gives us a database as centrally for worldwide, and countries can use this, and it's applicable to everyone. So as I said, I came from a casino background initially. I was successful there, but then probably from the last 15, 16 years, I've been dealing with this issue. We've had many, many people helping as is over the time we go. We deal with people internationally as well. But basically, the common law court effectively is the people. It's not an individual. It can never be an individual, because the common law court is a court and it's a jury of 12 people, always. So therefore, the jury dictates the decisions of the court and dictates what they're going to do. So it's all about living men and women. They said you can't have one individual. It's all about that. So effectively, we don't have, it's not a company, or anything. It's a lawful process, and it's something that exists for all people. Anyone can use this. So when you refer to the state and we convene cases and we're taking on the state, it's always the people, we the people, because the people are the common law court, and that's what sets it apart, and that's why the government don't like it, because they have to challenge the people, and they will not do that.
Well, thank goodness for the work you're doing, John, and commonlawcourt.com is the place to go. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have learned a lot of things in the last, hour or so that we've been chatting.
Well, hopefully they've picked it up and they've made it as simple as possible, but it's down to basic principles. As it says, cause no harm, loss or injury, and it's there to protect the people. So if the people actually are looking for a solution and they're looking for help within the system, it's not going to change their life, their day-to-day lives, but it will offer them the protection simply by establishing their position as a living man or a living woman. And it's open to everyone.
Okay. Thanks, John.